Have you ever crossed paths with someone who reshaped your existence, as if they dropped from the heavens? This is the tale of a lone father nurturing his daughter in a serene mountain hamlet, and the enigmatic woman who plummeted into their world amid a winter tempest. She arrived with nothing but a wrecked aircraft, a shadowed history, and a heart she vowed to keep locked forever. Yet, sometimes, a single gesture of compassion can rewrite your entire story, and sometimes, the place where you crash is precisely where you were destined to arrive. Before we embark on this touching journey of love, redemption, and the magic of finding home, be sure to subscribe if you cherish heartfelt, uplifting tales that stir the soul and warm the heart. Tap that bell to stay updated with every chapter. Now let's dive in. The storm swept in like a forgotten dream, gradual at first, then overwhelming. Ethan Carter stood on the rear porch of his simple home, one hand gripping the weathered railing, the other holding a chipped ceramic mug that still held the fading warmth of black coffee. The wind had shifted, biting, damp, and insistent, as if it carried an urgent message. He didn't need a weather report to sense what was coming. He'd lived in Haven Ridge long enough to read the sky like a sacred text. The clouds sagged low and heavy, laden with snow yet to fall, creating a night where time seemed to pause and hearts recalled their deepest losses. From inside, a gentle giggle floated out. Lily. He turned, a faint smile tugging at his lips. His 6-year-old daughter, endlessly curious and the reason he found the strength to face each dawn, sat cross-legged by the fireplace, constructing a cardboard control tower for the model airport they'd been crafting all week. "Do planes fly in storms like this, Daddy?" she asked, lifting her wide hazel eyes to him. He inhaled deeply, her innocence soothing the emptiness winter often etched into his soul. "Not the wise ones," he replied, stepping inside and tousling her chestnut curls. "In storms like this, the best place is home. Unless someone's out there, lost," she murmured softly. Ethan froze. The quiet way she spoke, almost to herself, made him pause, but before he could reply, the lights flickered once, then went out with a groan. Darkness enveloped them. Lily let out a small squeak, and Ethan grabbed the flashlight stashed under the side table, flicking it on to cast a soft glow across the room. The beam danced over model planes, the bookshelf, and the quilt his late wife had sewn before cancer silenced her forever. "It's just the storm," he said calmly. "We'll light candles, build a pillow fort, and weather it like explorers." But before he could act, a deep, rumbling boom echoed far off, followed by a sound unnatural to the mountain's quiet. A mechanical whine, abrupt, then gone. Lily looked up, clutching his hand. Was that thunder? Ethan's eyes narrowed. That wasn't thunder. He pulled on his coat over his flannel shirt, grabbing the heavy-duty flashlight from the hall. "Stay here. I'll be back." "Daddy," Lily began, but he was already at the door. Outside, the snow had begun, light but sharp, flakes whipping sideways in the wind. He scanned the sky, then the horizon beyond the trees, and spotted it. About a quarter-mile out, past his property's edge, just before the dense pines, an eerie orange glow. Something was burning. His boots crunched through snow and brittle leaves as he jogged across the field, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The wind roared louder, pushing against him like a warning, but Ethan had endured true loss. Fear no longer held him back. As he neared, the scene clarified. A small, high-end private plane, badly damaged, had crash-landed in the open field. One wing was sheared off, the tail had carved a deep gash in the earth, and smoke curled from the engine, though no flames were visible. He saw no movement. Approaching cautiously, he called, "Hello? Anyone there?" Silence. Then, a stir, The door creaked, and a figure slumped forward. Ethan sprang into action, climbing the wreckage. He reached inside, gently pulling the pilot into his arms. She was unconscious, blood trickling from a cut above her brow, her flight suit soaked with cold. She looked to be in her late 30s, with a strong jawline and hair tied back tightly, even in chaos. Her hands trembled, not from the chill, but from something deeper. "Hey," he said softly, supporting her weight. "I've got you." Her eyes fluttered open as he carried her down. "Where?" she whispered faintly. "Somewhere safe," he assured her. "Let's get you warm." Her eyes closed again. By the time he reached the porch, Lily had opened the door, clutching a blanket, her eyes wide with silent concern. Ethan carried the woman inside, laying her gently on the couch. The firelight cast a golden glow on her pale face. "Daddy, is she an angel?" Lily whispered. Ethan studied the woman, the bruises forming on her cheek, the deep lines of exhaustion etched into her features, and something in him stirred. "No," he said quietly, "but she fell from the sky all the same." The scent of cedar and aged books greeted Grace Emerson as she slowly opened her eyes, her vision still hazy. For a moment, the world tilted, a harsh reminder of what had happened. The storm, the failing engine, the field rushing up too fast. She tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her left shoulder. "You might want to go slow," a calm, grounded voice said nearby. She turned her head carefully and saw a man, early 40s, perhaps, sitting in a worn leather armchair by the fire. His face bore the ruggedness of someone who'd faced his share of storms, yet his eyes held kindness, not pity. That mattered more than she expected. "Where am I?" she rasped, throat parched. "You're in Haven Ridge, a small town in the northern Rockies." "Technically, my living room," he replied. She blinked, scanning the modest but cozy home. Pine floors, a stone fireplace, shelves filled with children's books, and old aviation manuals. A sky-blue model plane sat on the mantel. She looked down. Someone had draped her in a thick quilt, unzipped her flight suit halfway, and taped gauze gently over her brow. The man stood, crossing to her with a steady stride, and handed her a mug of warm tea. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Ethan Carter. You crash-landed about 100 yards from my backyard in a blizzard." Impressive aim. Grace took the mug but didn't drink. "How long was I out?" "A couple of hours." "You were hypothermic. That cut on your forehead probably needs stitches, but we make do without a doctor in town." As if summoned, soft footsteps approached. A little girl with messy curls peeked from the hallway. Grace blinked. Was this the same child from earlier, or a dream? Her large, curious eyes brimmed with trust, something Grace hadn't seen in years. "Hi," the girl said shyly. "I'm Lily. I'm 6.5. Grace nodded stiffly. "Hi, Lily. You fell from the sky," Lily added matter-of-factly. "Daddy said your plane looked like a silver bird." Ethan chuckled softly, nudging Lily gently. "Why don't you draw her a welcome picture, okay?" The girl chirped, skipping down the hall with purpose. Grace turned to Ethan. "She's yours." "Yeah, it's just us." She didn't ask about the mother. The single coffee mug, the childlike order of the home. She knew better than to probe. "I'll leave by morning," she said quietly, setting the mug down. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You can't be serious. I've got people waiting. Things to handle. You can barely move your arm." "I'll manage." Ethan exhaled, sitting again. "Look, I don't know what's out there for you, but right now, there's a level 3 storm warning, 0 visibility, and your radio's dead. The nearest mechanic is 2 towns over, and we don't exactly have rideshare here." Grace didn't reply. She stared at the fire, its light flickering on the brickwork. It was too quiet here, too still. It unnerved her more than the crash. "You're used to running," Ethan said softly. Her head whipped toward him. "Excuse me. I've seen that look before," he continued, not unkindly. "In the mirror, after my wife died. For a while, all I knew was how to keep moving. Then Lily came along, and I had to stop. Had to learn how to stay." Grace's jaw tightened. She hadn't come here for this. She hadn't chosen to come at all. The storm had decided for her, and now she was trapped in a stranger's home with a child and a man who spoke too openly. "I didn't ask for help," she muttered. "No," Ethan said simply. "But that doesn't mean you don't need it." Silence fell, deep and unbroken except for the soft hiss of snow against the windows. Grace stared into the fire, her mind flashing to what she'd fled. The scandal, the headlines, the betrayal by someone she'd once trusted completely. Her world had unraveled at 30,000 feet, and she was still falling. But here, in this humble room, things felt anchored, not easy, not safe, but real. Minutes passed. "You fly much?" she asked, glancing at the model planes. "Used to before Lily. Worked maintenance for a regional airline. Never got certified myself." She nodded, half listening, her body aching, her mind looping. Yet she didn't want to close her eyes, because when she did, she saw the spin. Lily returned, beaming, holding up a drawing. "Look, I made you in the sky, but with wings like a real angel." Grace stared at it, a stick figure with giant purple wings and a smile. Something in her chest cracked, not a fracture, but a softening. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter. "It's beautiful. You can keep it," Lily offered. "It'll make you feel better." Grace looked at Ethan, whose face held no judgment, only something like understanding. For the first time in years, Grace Emerson didn't feel like she was falling, just floating, and perhaps, just perhaps, beginning to land. The snow hadn't eased by morning. If anything, it had thickened into a silent, blinding veil outside the windows, cloaking Haven Ridge in a hush that seemed to stretch time itself. Grace stood at the kitchen window, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands. Ethan had insisted she stay another day, citing the weather and her injuries. She hadn't protested, not because she agreed, she never relied on anyone, but because something within her had simply surrendered. The quiet, the crackling fire, the faint hum of the radio playing Ella Fitzgerald. It dulled the edges of her usually razor-sharp vigilance. Behind her, Lily chattered to herself, assembling another model plane. The living room had become a miniature hangar, strewn with paper, glue, and plastic wings. Ethan, back from shoveling snow off the porch, shook out his jacket and gave Grace a half-smile as he passed. "You like your coffee strong, I take it?" he asked. "I like it honest," she replied, sipping it black. "Strong usually gets there faster." He nodded, then leaned over to check Lily's work, gently adjusting a wing. Grace watched quietly, struck by the tenderness in his movements. Unrehearsed, unperformed, just real. A man who'd learned to move carefully for someone smaller. Lily looked up. "Can Grace help me pick paint colors?" Grace hesitated. "You sure? I've been told I have terrible taste." Lily giggled. "That's okay. I do too." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Now that's teamwork." Grace sat beside Lily, and the girl pushed the tiny plane toward her, as if it were the most natural thing. "This one's special," Lily said. "It's gonna fly to see Mommy." Grace's hand paused. "Your mom?" Lily nodded. "She's in the sky. Daddy says she watches from there, so I'm building a plane to go real high. Maybe she'll see it and wave." The words struck Grace with a mix of warmth and pain. Children had a way of saying things that stole your breath. Not cruelly, but with a truth adults had forgotten. "She'd love that," Grace said softly. Lily smiled. "Did you ever fly to see someone you missed?" Grace's hand trembled slightly, holding the plane's tail. "No," she whispered, "but I used to fly to outrun them." Lily didn't grasp the weight, but she nodded, satisfied. Ethan, from the kitchen, had heard. His movements slowed, but he didn't interrupt. Grace cleared her throat, trying to tuck the ache away, but Lily, unfazed by adult pain, pressed on. "Did you always want to fly?" "Yes," Grace said after a pause. "Always. My dad was a pilot. He'd take me to the airfield when I was little. We'd lie on his truck's hood, watching takeoffs like they were magic." "Sounds fun," Lily said dreamily. Grace smiled faintly. It was back then. Flying meant freedom, being above it all. No pain, no mess, just sky. "But then you came down," Lily said, almost sadly. Grace's eyes glistened. "Yeah," she said. "I did." Ethan brought over 2 mugs, one for himself, another for Grace, and sat across from her at the dining table, letting Lily hum, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," as she painted. "You okay?" he asked gently. Grace didn't meet his gaze. She asked if I flew to see someone I missed. "And did you?" Grace swallowed hard. "I had a daughter once." Ethan's expression didn't shift. He waited patiently. "She came too early," Grace said, voice low. "I was too scared, too selfish. Told myself I wasn't ready to be a mother, that I had a career, a life. So I signed the papers, closed the door." Her jaw clenched. "I told myself it was best, that someone else could give her more. But years passed, and I stopped flying for joy. I flew to forget, and that never worked." Ethan sat back, his hand resting lightly on his mug. "Does she know?" Grace shook her head. "She was adopted. I never went back, never wanted to reopen that wound. Until recently, when everything else unraveled, the media, the headlines, the career I built on control. It all fell apart." Ethan's eyes searched hers. "And now?" Grace glanced at Lily, humming off-key, dabbing yellow paint on a wing. "Now, I don't know what I'm doing, but when your daughter gave me that picture, something broke." A long pause followed. "You know," Ethan said slowly, "sometimes we crash because we're headed somewhere we weren't meant to go. Doesn't mean the sky was wrong, just that the ground needed us more." Grace let out a dry laugh, half breath, half sorrow. "You always talk like that." "No," he said, eyes soft. "Only when someone looks like they haven't heard the truth in a while." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not a man trying to fix her, but one willing to sit in the wreckage. It was disarming, and maybe that's why she didn't pull away when Lily climbed into her lap, resting her head against Grace's chest. The girl whispered, "You can be our co-pilot if you want, just for a while." Grace didn't answer, but her arms tightened around Lily, saying more than words could. Grace Emerson had spent most of her adult life moving too fast to notice the ordinary. Schedules, checklists, departure times ruled her days with precision. If something lacked purpose, she ignored it. But here, in Ethan's quiet home, tucked in Haven Ridge's snow-draped edges, life slowed to a rhythm she hadn't known she craved. Mornings began with coffee hissing on the stove, Lily's sleepy voice drifting from her room, and the soft shuffle of Ethan's boots as he brought in firewood. The radio played old country or Sinatra on vinyl. The scent of maple syrup and toast filled the air. Nothing was grand, yet it made her chest ache. That morning, Grace stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing Ethan's oversized flannel over leggings. She couldn't recall when she'd stopped wearing her own clothes, still neatly folded in her duffel by the door, ready to go, yet she hadn't touched them. Ethan sat at the table, tinkering with a small engine part from Lily's broken toy helicopter. Lily scribbled furiously with crayons. "What's your drawing today, Ace?" Ethan asked, not looking up. Lily beamed. "A house with wings, so it can fly with us and never stay behind." Grace blinked. There it was again, Lily's effortless way of saying something that pierced her weakest spot and tapped gently. She poured 3 mugs of hot chocolate, adding extra marshmallows to Lily's without asking, and set them down. Ethan gave her a quiet nod of thanks. They didn't need many words. She'd learned their silences were never heavy, just comfortable. "I'm gonna build this for real," Lily declared, holding up her creation. "And when Mommy sees it, she'll know I'm okay." Grace sat beside her. "You think she can see you?" Lily didn't hesitate. "Of course. She lives in the clouds now." Grace glanced at Ethan, whose expression softened into something distant yet warm. The look of someone who lived with ghosts but had made peace with them. "She was a schoolteacher," he said quietly. "Brightest woman I knew. Loved books, airplanes, the smell of rain. Took Lily to the airstrip every Saturday, even when she was sick." Grace saw the emotion flicker in his eyes and looked away, sensing it was a rare story. "She passed 3 years ago," he added. "Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late." Grace's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she said. Ethan offered a small smile. "So was I, for a long time. But Lily, she kept me from drowning. Kids have a way of keeping you alive." Grace nodded, sipping her too sweet cocoa. It suited the moment. After breakfast, the snow eased enough for them to venture outside. Ethan pulled an old sled from the barn, and Lily squealed with delight. They spent the morning sliding down the hill behind the house. Grace hesitated at first, awkward in borrowed boots and oversized gloves, but Lily insisted, and Ethan's smirk dared her. When she finally launched herself down, her scream turned to laughter halfway, a raw, unfamiliar sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. Lily clapped at the bottom. "You're a natural." Grace collapsed in the snow beside her, breathless, grinning. "I think I lost a rib on that bump." Later, soaked and smiling like fools, they piled inside. Grace helped Lily out of her snow gear, hanging it by the fire. Ethan handed her a towel and a knowing glance. "You laugh like someone who forgot how," he said softly. She looked at him, surprised. "What makes you think I forgot?" He shrugged. "Just a hunch. Or maybe because I did too, once." They said no more, but the air between them warmed, like a fresh log on the fire. That evening, Grace offered to cook. Her hands were clumsy with the knife, rusty from years of in-flight meals and hotel takeout. But Ethan didn't judge, and Lily treated her under-seasoned stew like a masterpiece. After dinner, they sat in the living room while Lily built a paper airplane fleet. Grace leaned back on the couch, her body tired in a good way, the kind from real living. Ethan picked up an old photo album and offered it to her silently. She flipped through it slowly, snapshots of a life built on love and loss. Ethan in uniform, Lily as a baby in her mother's arms, the 3 of them at a lake. Grace's throat tightened. "I've missed a lot," she murmured. He looked at her. "We all do. But sometimes we get a second pass." Grace closed the album gently, staring into the fire. Outside, the wind howled, but the house stood firm. "This feels like home," she said, almost to herself. Ethan didn't speak. His quiet agreement in his eyes was enough. Though she wouldn't admit it yet, Grace knew something had changed. She'd fallen from the sky, broken, seeking nothing. But here, in this warm, ordinary place, surrounded by kindness and cardboard wings, she wondered if this was the flight that had finally brought her somewhere worth staying. The sky was clearer than it had been in days. The storm had passed, leaving a world blanketed in pristine white. Sunlight reflected off the snow, flooding the Carters' living room with soft morning light. But for Grace, the brightness felt exposing, not warm. She was packing, not frantically, but deliberately, like someone who knew what she was doing, even if her heart lagged behind. Her duffel sat half-zipped on the couch. Ethan stood by the fireplace, arms loosely folded, watching her with quiet caution. "You sure about this?" he asked. She nodded, avoiding his eyes. The storm's gone. Roads are clearing. I've stayed too long. You were healing. I was hiding. That stopped him. Grace softened her voice. This place, you, Lily, it's been more than I ever thought possible. But that doesn't mean I belong. He stepped forward. Says who? Before she could answer, a knock broke the silence. 3 sharp raps. They turned toward the door. Grace froze, her breath catching. No one was supposed to know she was here. Ethan hesitated, then opened the door. A man in a sleek black coat stood on the porch, snow melting around his boots. Tall, with close-cropped hair and the impatience of someone used to obedience, he spoke curtly. Good morning. I'm looking for Grace Emerson. Ethan glanced back. Grace stood rigid, lips tight. She's here, she said quietly, stepping forward. What do you want, Mark? The man's jaw tensed. We need to talk. Alone. Ethan didn't budge. Grace gave him a small nod. It's okay, she murmured. I've got this. She stepped onto the porch, closing the door. The cold hit like a slap, but she barely noticed. I told you not to come, she said, arms crossed. Mark's expression hardened. You vanished, Grace. The board's in chaos, legal's hounding me, shareholders are threatening lawsuits. You can't just disappear. She exhaled. I wasn't disappearing. I was breathing. He scoffed. By crashing a plane and hiding with strangers in the middle of nowhere. Grace's eyes narrowed. Don't turn this into a headline. Mark stepped closer, voice low. You walked away after everything we built. After everything No. She cut him off, voice icy. After you spun the lie, the press release, the scapegoat you needed when it all fell apart. His jaw twitched, but he stayed silent. I'm done, she said. Let them sue, let them talk. I'm not going back. Mark studied her, a flicker of something human, regret, perhaps, crossing his eyes before vanishing. You're making a mistake, he muttered, turning and stalking down the driveway, boots crunching snow. Grace stood there, breathing, letting the cold sting her cheeks to feel something real. When she re-entered, Ethan was waiting. Lily sat at the table, drawing, oblivious to the storm that had passed through. Ethan didn't speak, just looked at her steadily, as he had when he pulled her from the wreckage. She sat on the couch, duffel still half-packed. I should have told you who I was, she said. I figured you'd get there, he replied. Grace gave a hollow laugh. I wasn't just a pilot. I was COO of Emerson Aerodynamics, the company's face. The press called me the Queen of the Sky. I built an empire on control, precision, power. When one of our jets failed, they blamed the pilot. Ethan's jaw tightened. Was it his fault? No, she said. It was ours, a design flaw buried in a cost-cutting memo. But I was too busy protecting the brand. When it leaked, I became the story, the bad kind. She looked at her hands. So I left. Took a test aircraft, told no one, just flew. Ethan pulled a chair closer, sitting across from her, and crashed into my life. Grace looked up, surprised. Not a complaint, he added softly. Just an observation. They sat in silence. Then Grace asked, Do you think less of me? Ethan shook his head. No. I understand you better. Her voice dropped. What if I ruin this place too? You won't, he said, firm yet gentle. You can't ruin something you didn't build. You just stepped into it, and maybe gave it new meaning. Lily bounded over, holding a cardboard plane with hope scrawled on the wings. For you, she beamed, so you don't forget. Grace's hands trembled as she took it. Thank you, she whispered. Later, after Lily slept, Grace stood by the window, staring at the trees swaying in the moonlight. Ethan approached, a blanket over his arm. You don't have to leave, he said softly. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you're ready. Grace didn't answer, but when he draped the blanket over her shoulders, she didn't shrug it off. When she turned from the window, She didn't look back. The fireplace glowed faintly when Ethan entered, the flames mere amber whispers. Grace sat curled on the couch, wrapped in the blanket Lily had given her, her eyes tracing shadows on the wall, her mind lost in echoes of the past. Ethan set 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table. Couldn't sleep either? Grace didn't look at him. Do you ever stop hearing it? Hearing what? The sound of something ending. He took the chair across from her, giving her space. Sometimes, he said, and sometimes I think I've moved on, only for the silence to remind me I haven't. Grace drew a long breath. I've told you about the company, the scandal, Mark. But there's one thing I've never said aloud. Ethan waited, the silence soft as snow on pine. When I was 23, she began, I got pregnant. Ethan's eyes flickered, but he stayed silent. I was fresh out of flight school, eager for the sky. The father was another student, brilliant, reckless, gone when the test turned positive. I was scared, not of the baby, but of what she'd mean, what she'd disrupt, my training, my reputation, my path. She stared at the blanket. I hid it, carried her in secret, gave birth 6 weeks early in a hospital 3 states away. Signed the papers that day. No name, no contact, just gone. Her voice broke, but she continued. I told myself it was right, that she'd have a better life without me fumbling through. I thought I could keep flying and never look back. But I did. Every city I flew over, I wondered if she was there, looking up. Ethan leaned forward, voice low. You've carried that alone. Grace nodded. The guilt followed me into every cockpit, every promotion, every article calling me a trailblazer. When the scandal hit, I didn't feel angry. I felt exposed, like someone saw who I really was. Ethan's voice was quiet. You're not a monster, Grace. Just a coward. She stood, clutching the blanket, and moved to the window. Do you think people like me can be forgiven? She asked, barely audible. Ethan paused before answering. I think forgiveness isn't something you wait for. Sometimes you have to give it to yourself, or the weight keeps you circling. She turned to him. That's poetic. Do you talk in metaphors for a living? He smiled. Only after midnight. A faint smile touched her lips, but faded. I still think about her, Grace said. What she looks like, if she loves books, if she hates flying. Would you want to meet her? Grace's throat tightened. More than anything. But what if she doesn't want to meet me? Ethan stood, crossing the room, but not touching her, just standing close enough for his presence to feel like a steady engine hum. If she's anything like Lily, he said softly, she'd probably just want to know you tried. Grace met his eyes. The air between them was heavy with unspoken fear, longing, and something fragile neither dared name. I'm not used to kindness when people know the truth, she said. Then you've been around the wrong people. That broke something in her. Grace stepped forward, resting her forehead against his chest. Not romantic. Not yet. But something deeper, quieter. He didn't move, didn't press, just let her lean. Let her be held by something that asked for nothing. For Grace, that was more alien than flight. After a while, she pulled back, eyes red but clearer. Thank you, she said, for not fixing it. Ethan smiled. Some things aren't for fixing, just for carrying better. They stood at the window, moonlight dancing on the snow. An owl called in the distance. Grace exhaled slowly. I still don't know what's next. You don't have to, Ethan said. Maybe staying still is the bravest thing right now. Grace nodded, her heart stirring. She wasn't ready to stay forever, but for the first time in years, she wasn't desperate to flee. She looked at the paper plane Lily had given her, still on the windowsill, hope scrawled in purple crayon. She picked it up, holding it gently. I think I want to find her, she whispered. My daughter. Ethan met her eyes. Then I'll help you. Grace didn't reply, but her fingers curled around the paper wings. She didn't feel like a monster, a runaway, or even a pilot, just a woman finally brave enough to stop flying away. The snow was melting, icicles yielding to the returning sun, their softened edges glinting gold. The air felt lighter, less sharp, a morning that whispered, "It's time." Grace stood by the barn, brushing frost off her plane's wing. The damage wasn't as severe as it had seemed. A miracle, really. Ethan had helped her inspect it over the past days, and with parts from town, it was ready. She should have felt relief. Instead, her chest ached with an unnamed weight. Ethan emerged from the house, holding a thermos and 2 paper-wrapped breakfast sandwiches. He crossed the yard unhurriedly, like the world would wait. "Morning," he said, offering a sandwich. "Bacon and egg, the usual." Grace smiled faintly, taking it. "Thanks." They stood by the plane, eating in easy silence, the sun rising behind the ridge. "You fixed her up fast," he said, nodding at the aircraft. "I had help," she replied, glancing at him. He looked down, thumb tracing the thermos's seam. "So, when do you take off?" "Couple of hours. Weather window opens at noon." Ethan nodded but stayed quiet. Grace hated how much she wanted him to protest, to say stay, to give her a reason to linger. But he wouldn't. That wasn't him. Instead, he said, "I packed snacks for the flight. Lily helped. There's a note in there, too. She said you'll know it when you see it." Grace's smile wavered. "Where is she?" she asked softly. "In her room, making you something." They walked back to the house, side by side but miles apart in thought. The warmth of firelight, laughter, and quiet healing felt thinner now, fragile, like a taut thread. Inside, Lily waited by the door, clutching something behind her back. Grace knelt. "Hey, Ace." Lily looked up, eyes too bright. "Daddy said you're leaving." Grace nodded, voice tight. "I am, but not because I want to." "Then why?" Grace took a breath. "Sometimes, people have to go figure out what's next. And I have someone I need to find." Lily tilted her head. "The girl from the sky?" Grace blinked. "What?" "The one you think about when you look sad. Is she your daughter?" Grace stared, stunned. "How did you?" "You talk in your sleep," Lily said simply. "Sometimes you say I'm sorry a lot." Grace looked down, overwhelmed, but Lily touched her cheek. "It's okay. I think she'll forgive you. But you should tell her everything, like you told me." Grace pulled Lily into a fierce hug, her chest tight with unshed tears. Lily whispered, "You can come back, right?" Grace swallowed. "If your daddy lets me." A moment later, Lily stepped back and presented the item she'd concealed, a tiny wooden keychain, carved into a house with wings, adorned with wobbly, colorful paint mirroring her drawing from days before. "So you always remember where you found your place," Lily said. Grace clutched it to her chest. "I won't forget." Ethan stood nearby, quiet. Grace rose, meeting his eyes. "I meant what I said," she told him. "About finding her, about not running anymore." "I know," he replied, his voice soft. "And if you find her, and there's room for someone like me on the flight back," his words faded, a shy smile breaking through. Grace reached out, her warm fingers brushing his, lingering. "There's more than room," she whispered. "But I need to earn it first." Outside, the sky stretched vast and blue, the kind pilots dream of. Grace walked toward the plane, each step heavier than the last. She climbed in, ran through the pre-flight checks, and sealed the cockpit door. Ethan and Lily stood together in the field, watching as the engine roared and the plane glided over the snow-damp grass. Grace glanced at the keychain in her lap, the word home scrawled in uneven paint on its wing. She could hardly see them as she took off, the father and daughter waving below, but she felt their message, not farewell, but return. Grace had always cherished the hum of engines, the steady pulse beneath the fuselage, the rhythmic tremor through the yoke. the ascent and leveling of altitude like a second pulse. It used to calm her, but now flying felt strange, too smooth, too silent. The sky was perfect, cloudless, boundless. It should have been liberation. Instead, it felt like separation. She steadied the plane and gazed over the sprawling plains below, but her mind kept returning to a small town nestled in the Rockies and the people she'd left on the frosty grass. She reached into her flight bag, pulling out the package Ethan had prepared. Inside was a cloth sack with trail mix, a thermos of coffee wrapped in a dishcloth, and a folded sheet of paper marked with crayon. Dear Miss Grace, I hope you find your girl. Tell her she's lucky because you're the bravest person I know. Come back soon so we can make more flying houses. Love, Lily. P.S. Daddy misses you. He didn't say it, but I know. Grace pressed the note to her lips, catching faint traces of maple syrup and wood smoke. She didn't weep, but she didn't smile either. The closer she flew to her former life, the heavier her heart grew. 2 days later, Grace sat in her old Seattle apartment, high above the city, staring at the shimmering skyline. Everything looked unchanged. Sleek furniture, glass surfaces, the untouched guest room, awards lined along the hallway like sentinels of her past. But she no longer fit here, not truly. She tried to resume her routine, replying to a few emails, listening to voicemails, mostly from reporters, some from ex-board members offering cautious concern. She ignored them all. That afternoon, she took the elevator down, stepped onto the bustling street, and walked 2 blocks to a familiar quiet cafe. She ordered chamomile tea, sat by the window, and opened her laptop. After a pause, she typed, "How to locate a child given up for adoption, closed records, Washington State." Seeing it in text felt unreal, like unraveling a spell she'd cast on herself decades ago. A few clicks led to registries, intermediaries, and petition processes, clinical terms for a deeply personal quest. Then she found a nonprofit focused on reunions. Their homepage showed a woman embracing an adult daughter, both tearful in the rain. Grace stared at it for a long time before clicking Start Your Search. The form was simple: name, birth date, city, hospital. Her hands shook as she entered her daughter's birth date, March 17th, and paused. That year felt like another existence. She recalled holding her briefly, swaddled, silent. The nurse had hesitated, as if silently asking, "Are you certain?" But Grace had already chosen. Flight over family, ambition over doubt. Now, 20 years later, she was reversing that choice, line by line. She pressed submit. The page thanked her, promising contact in days. No fanfare, no relief, just silence. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. The city's noise, once soothing, now grated. Horns, sirens, elevators creaking in the walls. She stood by her floor-to-ceiling window, arms wrapped around herself, gazing at the tiny world below. She thought of Lily, likely curled in flannel pajamas, clutching that paper airplane. She thought of Ethan, sipping coffee on the porch, tinkering to stay busy. She thought of the house's warmth when bread baked, the laughter during Lily's invented games, the way Ethan's voice softened when he spoke just to her. She'd left because she had to, but now, away, everything felt empty. The next morning, Grace drove to a suburban street lined with trees, where a modest brick house stood behind a picket fence. She'd found the address through the adoption agency's records, not her daughter's home, but her adoptive parents'. She didn't plan to knock, she just needed to see it. Parked a block away, her heart raced, palms sweaty. The mailbox read Wilson. Grace's breath hitched. She remembered writing that name on the forms, the family's name. They were teachers, married 15 years, unable to have children. The agency said they were kind. Grace hadn't asked more. Now the house looked warm, lived in, with a bicycle by the garage and 2 dogs dozing in the yard. She watched for 20 minutes. Then the front door opened. A woman in her mid-60s, with short gray hair and a gentle face, knelt to check the mail. Moments later, a younger woman appeared, early 20s, auburn hair in a bun, wearing scrubs, laughing at her phone. Grace's heart stopped. She was beautiful, real, right there. Grace's fingers gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. She didn't step out, didn't introduce herself, didn't disrupt that moment with 1,000 unsaid apologies. She wasn't ready yet. Instead, she watched, memorized, burned the image into her soul, then drove away. Not forever, just not now. She had more to do. The road to Haven Ridge felt both foreign and deeply familiar. Grace gripped the steering wheel as she turned onto the main street, her rental car humming softly. The snow had mostly melted, revealing muddy ditches, budding trees, and the quiet charm of a town that didn't change for anyone. She passed the diner, still touting its Wednesday meatloaf special, and the hardware store with its faded closed Mondays sign. Children in knit caps kicked a soccer ball on the church lawn. Grace slowed as she passed the little library Lily had once shown her, a paper rainbow still taped to the window. She hadn't called ahead, hadn't texted or warned. She didn't know if she was brave or foolish. Ethan's house appeared just past the ridge, calm and steady in the mid-morning light. The barn leaned as always, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Grace pulled into the drive, cut the engine, and stepped out, gravel crunching under her boots. Her legs felt heavy, each step carrying the weight of all she'd been. The porch creaked as she raised her hand, hesitated, then knocked. Footsteps inside, then silence. The door opened. Ethan stood there, looking older, or perhaps just more tired. His eyes scanned her face, assessing, but they didn't harden or shut her out. "Hey," she said, barely audible. He nodded. "Hey." A beat passed. "You're early," he added. Grace blinked. "Early." He stepped back, holding the door. "Lily said you'd return. She just thought it'd be spring." Grace exhaled, half laugh, half sob. "She's smarter than me." "Yeah," he said gently, "she is." Grace stepped into the house's warmth, the scent hitting her instantly: cedar, cinnamon, faint maple, and firewood. It smelled like memory, like forgiveness. The living room was nearly unchanged. Model planes on the windowsill, the worn quilt folded on the couch, a crayon drawing on the fridge labeled Sky House Project Phase 2. She turned to him. "I didn't know if you'd want me back." He didn't reply immediately, studying her, not with suspicion, but like a man checking the sky before trusting the breeze. "What changed?" he asked. Grace swallowed. "I saw her, my daughter, from afar. I found her adoptive family." She looked happy, whole. Her laugh, it reminded me of Lily. "Did you speak to her?" "No, not yet. I wasn't ready. But I knew I couldn't return to my old life. Not really. I don't want high-rise apartments or empty meetings. I want something real, even if it's messy." He crossed his arms. "And you think you'll find that here?" "I think I already did," she said. And I walked away before I understood its value. He nodded slowly, jaw shifting. "You heard Lily when you left." "I know," her voice broke. "And I'll spend as long as it takes proving I won't do it again." Footsteps pattered down the hall. Lily burst in, clutching a toy plane, her eyes wide, too big for her frame. "Miss Grace." Grace knelt, arms open but cautious. "Hey, Ace." Lily hesitated, lips trembling, brows furrowed. Then, wordlessly, she ran across the room, crashing into Grace's embrace. "You came back," she whispered into Grace's shoulder. "I did," Grace said, tears sliding down her cheek. "And I'm not leaving unless you tell me to." Lily pulled back, meeting her eyes. "Are you staying in the Sky House?" Grace laughed, breathless. If there's still room. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, lips twitching. There's room, but the window leaks, and you'll have to help with dishes. Grace looked up, something blooming in her chest. Deal. They spent the afternoon together. Nothing grand, nothing planned. Just lunch at the old wooden table, Lily chattering about her new school project, Ethan fixing a drawer that had slipped its track, and Grace washing dishes, sleeves rolled up, barefoot on the tile. As the sun dipped below the ridge and the house quieted, Grace stepped onto the porch. Ethan joined her moments later, coffee in hand. They watched the last light fade behind the trees. I wasn't sure I could be someone worth staying for, she said softly. Ethan looked at her, steady as always. You didn't need to be perfect, he said. You just needed to come home. She met his gaze, and in that quiet moment, the space between them felt whole, earned. The stars emerged, and Grace tilted her head back. For years, she'd thought the sky was her only refuge. But tonight, with the creak of wood beneath her and the hum of life inside, she realized she didn't need wings anymore. She'd found her place to land. Grace stood in the community center gym, a roll of duct tape in one hand, a bundle of string in the other, as two fourth graders debated whether their cardboard plane needed a glitter rudder. Glitter doesn't make it fly, one said, annoyed. But it makes it cooler, the other countered, arms folded. Grace grinned. All right, engineers, let's compromise. Aerodynamic and fabulous. She knelt to help attach the wings as Lily skipped over with her creation, a plane of popsicle sticks, duct tape, and two mini googly eyes. I call her Miss Skyface, Lily declared proudly. Looks like she sees all, Grace said, smiling. The room buzzed with art supplies, laughter, and the snip of scissors on cardboard. The program was Grace's idea, a weekly model building workshop for local kids in the old high school gym. She'd pitched it as teaching creativity and teamwork, but it began with Lily's quiet breakfast question. Can we help other kids build skyhouses too? 3 weeks later, Grace was here every Saturday, sleeves up, covered in glue and joy, mending something within herself in the chaos. After the session, as the last child left, Grace helped Ethan stack folding chairs. Lily sat in the bleachers with a juice box and clipboard, planning next week's event. You're good with them, Ethan said, carrying 2 chairs. Grace chuckled. It's mostly bribes and googly eyes. No, he said, pausing. You listen, you lift them. It matters. She looked up, caught by the softness in his voice. Thanks. I didn't think I had that in me. You didn't give yourself a chance to find out before. Their eyes locked a moment too long. Then they looked away, both smiling faintly. Outside, the wind stirred budding trees. Spring was returning, slow and stubborn. That afternoon, Grace and Lily sat on the back porch, painting wooden plane wings. Lily hummed, legs swinging. Can I ask something? She said suddenly. Of course. Lily dipped her brush in blue. Are you my mom now? Grace's hands froze. I mean, Lily continued, not looking up, you're not my real mom, but I kind of feel like you could be. Grace's throat tightened. Do you want me to be? Lily shrugged. I want you to be here. That's all. Grace swallowed, taking Lily's paint-smeared hand. Then I'll stay for as long as you'll have me. Lily smiled, satisfied, and resumed painting. Later, they hung the planes from Lily's bedroom ceiling with fishing line, turning her room into a paper sky. Grace watched as Lily lay beneath them, eyes glowing. I used to dream about flying to see my mom, Lily said softly. Now I don't have to. I can stay here because you came back. Grace sat beside her, brushing a curl from her forehead. And I always will. Word spread fast in town. The gruff feed store owner stopped Grace on Main Street to thank her for teaching his grandson to build a dang decent biplane. The librarian invited her to speak on flight physics. A retired pilot asked her to help restore his crop duster. Grace accepted every request, not for attention, but because she wanted to belong. One day, she found a folded note on her windshield, written in a child's careful hand. "Thank you for giving us wings. Haven Ridge, 4th grade." She kept it in her jacket, smiling faintly. One morning, passing the hallway mirror, she saw her reflection, face relaxed, eyes bright, a smear of paint on her cheek, and smiled. That evening, Ethan grilled dinner out back, while Lily set the table with paper placemats. Grace brought out a salad bowl, catching Ethan's gaze. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd find this again." "This?" she asked. Laughter in the yard, messy plates, someone humming while they sweep. Grace paused. "Do you miss her?" Ethan didn't dodge. "Every day? But it doesn't hurt like it used to." She nodded, grateful for his honesty. "I don't want to replace anyone," she said. "You haven't," he replied. "You filled a space no one else could." They stood there, the fading sun casting a golden glow. Lily poked her head out. "Dinner's ready, and I made dessert. It's mostly edible." They laughed and followed her in. That night, after Lily slept and the dishes dried, Ethan walked Grace to the porch. She looked at the stars. "Do you still fly in your dreams?" "Sometimes," he said. "But now I land too." Grace smiled. "What happens next?" He didn't answer right away. "We live. We stay. We build something." "And if I mess it up?" she asked quietly. Ethan's eyes were steady. "We fix it together." She took his hand, not dramatically, not for show, just because it felt right. Standing side by side under the stars, Grace felt something shift. She'd once believed the sky was her only home, but now she knew the truth. The wings she needed weren't for escape. They were for returning. The valley bloomed with spring's vibrance. Dogwoods flowered along the airfield's edge, their pale pink petals dancing in soft breezes. The tall grass, once snow-laden and brittle, now swayed like a green sea speckled with dandelions and clover. Grace stood by the old hangar, hands on hips, watching Lily race across the field, a trail of ribbons streaming behind her. Lily had insisted they test her new kite for aerodynamic research, she declared with a scientist's gravity. The kite soared. Lily hooped. Grace laughed, shading her eyes to follow the blue triangle spinning against the sky. "She's grown," Ethan said, approaching with 2 lemonades. Grace took one, nodding. "In confidence, especially." He smiled. "Wonder where she gets that." Grace gave him a playful look. "I was thinking you." "Nah," he said. "She's got your stubborn streak." Grace let the compliment settle quietly. The airfield had become their Sunday ritual since her return, not to fly, but to be near its spirit. They cleared brush, painted trim, fixed an old windsock. Lily called it Skyhouse 2.0. It still smelled of motor oil and hay. Like all the best places, Ethan had said once. Today, though, something felt different. The clouds farther apart, the breeze warmer, the birds flying slower, with purpose. Grace turned to Ethan, sensing it wasn't just the weather. "You're quiet," she said. He met her eyes, as if weighing whether this was the moment or if he'd missed it. "I was thinking," he said finally, "how fast things change. One winter storm, one broken engine, one knock on the door." Grace smiled softly. "And a whole lot of duct tape." He chuckled. "Yeah, that too." Lily ran back, cheeks flushed, dropping the kite at Grace's feet and leaning into her side. "Did you see that loop-de-loop? That was advanced stabilizer placement." Grace tousled her hair. "You're an aeronautical genius." Lily beamed, then dashed off to pick wildflowers. Ethan turned to Grace. "Remember the day you walked through my door?" "Barely," she teased. "I was bleeding and half frozen." "Yeah, and still looked like you needed nothing." Grace laughed. I was faking it hard. I know, he said. But you stayed, even when you didn't have to. She looked at him, seeing the quiet certainty, the anchored steadiness, the unspoken affection that never demanded anything. You've given me a lot, Ethan, she said. I didn't give you anything you didn't already have, he replied. I just saw it. Grace's throat tightened. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, folded paper, worn at the edges. Not a ring, not a grand gesture. She opened it, a hand-drawn blueprint in Lily's crayon colors. A house with airplane wings, 3 stick figures beneath it, a tall man, a woman with wild red hair, a little girl holding their hands. Above the roof, one word, family. Grace blinked hard. I know you're still figuring things out, Ethan said. And life doesn't come with easy landings. But if you ever want to build something grounded, I'd like to build it with you. Grace folded the paper, holding it to her chest. I already decided, she said. He raised an eyebrow. I decided when I stopped running, she added. It just took me a while to catch up. The sun dipped, casting long shadows. Lily skipped back with daisies, plopping them into Grace's hand. For our dinner table, she said. Grace laughed. The soup might taste better now. You're welcome, Lily replied, skipping toward the truck. Grace turned to Ethan. I'm not perfect, she said. You know that better than most. Perfect's not the goal, he replied. Present is. He reached for her hand. Not a pressured promise, not a romantic climax, but a quiet invitation. Stay. Grace laced her fingers through his, nodding wordlessly. They walked across the field toward dinner, toward a life unfolding, toward a love with nothing to prove and everything to give. Above them, the kite's ribbons fluttered, dancing like wings against the settling sky. The sky was clear the day they said yes, not in a church, not under chandeliers or floral arches, but on the runway of Haven Ridge's old airfield, where it all began. Just faded asphalt lined with folding chairs, wildflowers, and mason jars, with a small crowd to witness something beautifully simple. Grace adjusted her pale blue dress's hem, glancing at the hanger where Lily twirled in sparkly flats, curls bouncing like the ribbons on her wrists. A paper plane sailed past, and Lily caught it midair, grinning triumphantly. 23 successful landings today, she announced, holding it like a trophy. Better than my first flight, Grace said, laughing. Across the field, Ethan approached in a button-down and suspenders, looking like an old photo. He wasn't one for spectacle, but his steady, certain smile said more than vows could. He took her hand silently. The officiant, the town librarian who ran the poetry club, opened with a reading about flying, falling, and finding home. Grace barely heard over her pounding heart, not from nerves, but because she had nothing to flee, only something to embrace. Ethan's vows were simple. You fell from the sky and gave us a reason to look up again. Grace's voice shook but held. You didn't try to fix me. You made it safe to land. They kissed to wind, laughter, and a flurry of handmade paper planes launched by every child in town. Some flew straight, some spun wildly, all soared. The celebration spilled into the hangar, now a reception space with strung lights and picnic tables. Potluck chili, cornbread, and countless pies filled the air. Lily introduced every guest like a talk show host. Grace moved through it with a calm she'd never known in her old life, laughing freely, hugging without reserve, dancing barefoot with Lily to a bluegrass, Fly Me to the Moon. Later, Grace stood at the hangar's edge, sipping lemonade, watching the sky shift from gold to lavender. Ethan joined her, their arms brushing. You okay? He asked. Grace nodded. Better than okay. He waited. I got a letter, she said. From the agency. Ethan straightened. Your daughter. She's in college, studying veterinary science. Her parents gave her my contact info. She hasn't reached out, but she knows I'm here, that I want to meet her. Ethan took her hand silently. That's enough for now, Grace said. The door's open, and I won't close it. Lily ran up, breathless. There's dancing, marshmallows, and someone's goat got loose. Grace grinned. Let's save the party. Later, after the last car left and stars shone brightly, Grace, Ethan, and Lily sat on the airfield office's back steps, wrapped in a quilt. The world was quiet, sacredly content. Lily leaned on Grace's shoulder. Best day ever, she said. Grace kissed her curls. It really was. They sat silently, watching fireflies drift. Lily whispered, We're a real family now, huh? Ethan smiled. We always were, but today made it official. Now we all have the same last name, Lily added. Grace squeezed her hand. That's just letters, sweetheart. What matters is the name we write together every day. Lily considered, then looked at the stars. Do you think Mommy saw today? Ethan's voice was gentle. I think she sees every day. Lily nodded, content. Grace gazed at the sky, not thinking of loss, but of love's vast reach, through storms, silence, years of distance. In that quiet moment, something settled. Not an end, not a finish line, just the peace of being home. In the weeks that followed, life wasn't perfect, just wonderfully real. Grace continued the model flight program, helping open a small aviation education center in town. Ethan restored the crop duster with retirees' help, and Lily wrote a book, The Girl Who Fell from the Sky and Forgot She Was an Angel. Grace mailed a copy to her daughter, not expecting a reply. But one morning, an envelope arrived, plain white, no return address. Inside, a single line in neat handwriting. I read the book. Let's meet sometime. Maybe somewhere we can see the sky. Grace held it to her heart, then walked inside, sunlight catching her ring, Lily's drawings on the fridge, Ethan humming in the kitchen. We hope this story warmed your heart as it did ours. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? A quiet town like Haven Ridge or a bustling city far from the mountains? Share in the comments. We read every one. If you love this story, please subscribe and tap the notification bell to never miss another heartfelt journey. We share tales of love, healing, and everyday kindness, and we'd love for you to join our growing family. From our hearts, thank you for your time. Until next time, keep believing in second chances.